looks like we've got pretty much everybody here. So we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce both Christina and Tracy. They are doing a presentation, Yoga for Your MDM, using your MDM to support flexible and student-centered learning options. So Christina Gremillion is, she has experience as a teacher, a school counselor, a principal, and instructional technologist. With half of those 22 years in K-12 education as an MDM admin and professional development trainer, she has since transitioned to a corporate role where she uses her experiences and grit to guide other educators and admins in finding solutions in their learning environments using Apple. In her spare time, Christina enjoys water, Pilates, and yoga. I'm not sure if it was water, Pilates, or water and Pilates, but she also loves listening.
Both are in the water.
I'm okay. A girl. Yeah. It's relaxing water. And she also loves gospel and neo-soul. And then Tracy Joyce, wife, mother, teacher, dog lover, and a perpetual champion for women in tech. Tracy brings with her the verve and sassiness that comes with thriving through over 20 years in K-12 education, at least half of which focused on educational technology. Having recently transitioned to the corporate world, just like Christina, Tracy is excited to apply her passion for the classroom by helping to make life easier for teachers, students, parents, and administrators using Apple. When she's not jamping, Tracy can be found walking her dogs, biking with her son, or when the weather allows, working in the gardens. So Christina, Tracy, thanks for joining us. Before we get started, sorry, I don't want to roll over my cat. I just did before the break and she screamed at me. This is going to be an interactive presentation, everybody. So we're going to practice something. I want you all to, or not all of you, whoever's interested, raise your hands, use the raise hand button in Zoom. And when those hands goes up, Christina or Tracy will be calling on someone to interact with the presentation. So Anthony's got one. We've got 2 hands up in chat. If you need to find the raise hands button, I believe it should show up right in the bottom beside Q&A and between chat. Great. Thanks, everybody. Did you guys have anything you wanted to add about the interactive nature?
We will be asking people to also interact in the chat too. So, and actually we'll start off with a little interactive piece here. Since you did so great at introducing us and telling all of the bio kind of things, we thought we would give you a little bit more of a glimpse into who we are by way of 2 truths and a lie. So in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to tell you 3 things about me. One of them is a lie, and we'll see if anyone gets it right. So
before we begin, sorry to cut you off, Tracy. I know you're on a super roll here. Do we have chat turned off? Do we need to turn it on for everyone?
Could we please?
We probably can. Maurice, is that possible to do, or Min, just for this one? Which is wonderful.
Be able to do it.
Okay. Hold, please.
Yes, I just did. So.
Okay. Can we get some test chat? How's that working for everybody? Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Sorry, Tracy.
Alrighty.
Take it away.
Great. Okay. All right. So 3 things about me. Number 1, I have met Oprah Winfrey twice. Number 2, I have seen the Pope in person. Not sure which one of those is more important in my life. And number 3, I am a huge lover of jazz music. So which one is the lie? Number 3, I see Pope. Nobody loves jazz.
Love it.
Well, thank you all for playing along. Yes, I do not like jazz, but the other 2 things are actually true. And not today, but if you ever want to hear the story, I'd be happy to tell you, because they were both like pretty equally impressive in my life. So, but I'll turn it over to Christina.
Good morning, afternoon. I borrowed that from James.
My two truths and a lie are, I'm the grandmother of 6. I was a cellist for 10 years, and I am the president of our local Toastmasters chapter. Two truths and a lie. Not a grandma. Cello, grandma, cello. So they're going between the cello and the grandma. Well, when you are a blended family, it is possible for you to be the grandmother of 6. So I have 5 grandboys and 1 grandgirl who's actually a freshman in college. And yes, I did play the cello from 5th grade all the way up to sophomore in college. And when you're a physics major, you got to catch those classes when they come. So that's what made me put Tiffany, my cello, down. And I am not the president of the local Toastmasters group. So thank you for playing along with our little icebreaker, and feel free to play two truths and a lie. Tracy?
I wanted to point out though that the truth that both Christina and I have in common, besides so many other things, it's we're 2 peas in a pod for sure, is that we were both Jamf Pro admins, and we have both used it in our K-12 lives. And so we come to our corporate experience having that experience behind us. So when we are presenting, you know that we've lived the other side of this presentation as well. So,
yeah.
All right. So here's what we're going to cover today. Christina, take it away.
So our agenda is we're going to talk briefly about MDM, describe and show you some flexible learning environments. We're going to cover student-centered learning, exactly what that is and what that looks like, and look at some case studies.
And when we get to the case studies, that's when we're going to be asking for your input too, and asking you to share your experience with our different environments and what we have all been through in the last, year and a half, and what we have learned. Oops, excuse me. So we are assuming that everybody has a pretty good idea of what an MDM is. So we're not going to go over that part of it. But the point we're trying to make today is that your MDM should not be a slow cooker where you set it and forget it and don't spend a lot of time tinkering around. What we would like for you to think of your MDM as something that is a little more flexible, maybe not this flexible, but flexible in that it can meet your needs of your users. It can be limber, and it can be, it can reach out and really empower your end user to make the most of their learning environment, wherever that learning environment might be. So, some things that we're just going to highlight when we're talking about MDMs, some things that you might want to consider, or maybe you have considered them before, but deployment is, oh, I keep going backwards, sorry. Deployment is always a big one. So we're talking about, how are we getting these devices into the hands of teachers and students and staff, whoever is using them. And I think one really important thing that we learned in COVID is sometimes we need to make sure that those devices have eSIM, or eSIM accessible. So we know that we need to provision them, hopefully through our MDM, so that they are devices that are ready to work outside of a Wi-Fi setting. And that is something that I think people were kind of scrambling and rushing to do at the beginning of COVID. And when we're talking about deployment, it's not just, hands-free deployment where we're just handing off a device to the student and they can log in, but we're also making sure that it has everything it needs so that that student can be, they can be doing their assignments right away. The other thing that I found very important is inventory. So in the environment that I worked in, we had both MacBooks, we had iMacs, we had iPads, all within our Jamf Pro, all within our MDM. And it was really helpful for me to see all of them in one place and to know what are students' devices, what are the teachers' devices, what are sitting over there in that lab, what do I need to access, what devices are suddenly now needing some kind of an upgrade. And being able to have that inventory with all of that detail in one place is really important. It was important for me, so. Alrighty.
With configurations in your MDM, depending on the MDM you choose, some configurations will allow you to set up the devices such that when they are placed in the hands of your end users, they are zero touch. It's a matter of turning them on and going through the swipes or the clicks, and they are ready to go. So configurations not only set up the devices, but once they are set up or prior to set up, restrictions can be put into place. And you have that flexibility, keyword there, to lock things down per the situation that's in place. The management controls are also something, or commands are also something that can be very advantageous to you. If you, who's all had the pesky passcode lockout, if your MDM has a management command setting where you can unlock it and using management commands, then that's going to be great for you. Also, the activation lock, instead of you waiting on Apple to unlock the device, you may have that at your fingertips. Also, you can deploy your apps using your MDM, especially if you have your Apple School Manager or Apple Business Manager account set up. Please see your Apple system engineer or account representative to help you with that. But that's going to help you with some other things we'll talk about along the course of the presentation. This also, with the Apple School Manager, Apple Business Manager, allows you to purchase apps in volume, tax-free. It also allows you to scope these apps to the devices as you see fit.
That's great. Security and privacy, I think, is top of everyone's mind, and especially when we're talking about student data, there are a lot of things that we need to consider. So making sure that your MDM complements what Apple has already put in place for their existing security and privacy features is really an important consideration as well. And then what we're calling MDM empowered applications. So those are those apps that can be configured using your MDM that allow your end user to be a more empowered user. If you have something like self-service, that is something that allows the end user to be empowered themselves, whether it is finding the materials they need, maybe it's finding the staff handbook, maybe it is finding the app they need. But having that flexibility to service themselves is really a key advantage to having a flexible MDM. So student-centered learning. Go ahead, Christina.
So what exactly do we mean when we say student-centered learning? It means the students determine how, what, when, and where they learn. We had this.
Oh my goodness, sorry. I'm like happy fingers today. Sorry.
You need that clicker that Armin was talking about earlier.
We had this a little bit in our district prior to COVID, where we had, I'd say about 30% of our schools before we adopted an LMS in Google Classroom. And so there was that student-centered learning already in place. However, once we had the advent of COVID, we were all forced to, hey, we're either going to jump in or we're going to be left behind, and especially our students. So we did adopt an LMS, and that really opened the door for where we had to look at student-centered learning, how they were going to learn. Okay, Tracy's already talked about student access to the internet. If we didn't have hotspots available, then we had to look at student devices with cellular service. as an option. Okay, if there were no access points in that area, we had to work with local stakeholders so that the students can access internet with public hotspots if they were available. What they learned, they didn't have to wait to get to math class because all the buildings were closed for a certain setting to work on that particular subject matter. There was an app put in place so that the student could annotate and solve that problem on a whiteboard, penultimate, explain everything. We had a single sign-on app. We used something called ClassLink so that everything was centrally located in that one app so that when they sign on to one, everything was signed into with that one set of credentials. When was no longer an option. Although the school bell is from most times 8 to 3, we had some students that had to wait on working parents to get home to help them. So there were no boundaries of walls and time. And where, even after COVID, we had students taking advantage of bus rides home because here we have schools that are located in rural as well as suburban areas. So they were car ride, bus ride assignments home where they had downloaded the information and had it there on the device, and the device was robust enough to hold it. So student-centered learning is exactly what you see. It is how, what, when, and where. And with the power of your MDM, you could put parameters into place using configuration profile, app deployment to make that device exactly what your students need for your teachers to continue that learning.
Great. Now it doesn't want to go forward. I don't know if my computer is a little possessed. I don't know. When we're talking about flexible learning environments, we are really no longer talking about the one teacher, one classroom scenario. This is not what we're going at. We've got a lot of options, and we've learned that we have to make a lot of options work for our students. So the ones that we're going to be focusing on today involve a lab situation. So maybe you have 20 or 30 Macs or iPads in a lab type situation. A shared cart situation is another thing that both Christina and I have worked with in the past. We had both shared MacBooks and iPad carts. I know Christina had a lot of iPad carts. And those are shared between 2 or more classrooms, maybe even in the same day. And then a one-on-one type situation where students are assigned their own device, likely in a hybrid learning situation where, or in our example, we're talking about a hybrid situation where students will be at home or maybe not in the building or have flexibility in where they are learning. All right, so we're gonna take a look. We're gonna dive into our 3 different scenarios, and this is where we kind of want you to be thinking about what you want to add to the conversation when it comes to these 3 different scenarios. So in the shared lab situation, we had a lab that was dedicated to our 3D printing program, and it had the CAD software on it. So when the students came in, they typically use it to design their projects. It was connected to our 3D printers or other things. We had other things, but I'm just going to stick with 3D printing for right now. And that was what that lab was typically used for. And then sometimes 3 times a year or so, we had to switch that lab on a dime, and all of a sudden it becomes a testing lab. And you can use your MDM to create that secured testing situation for you by sometimes you have apps that are already created for you that you can just deploy to those computers, and they have all the configurations already built for you. But you can also create them yourself. You can build your own assessment environment that can do the things that you want to do, like turning on the camera or turning off predictive typing or spell check, limiting websites, locking people into certain websites, and really create that testing mode. We would always put a customized wallpaper on our desktops as well that said, like, this device is set up for standardized testing. It's not available for student use right now. Please contact your teacher or something like that. And that way, in those situations where there isn't someone monitoring the lab at all times, they know like, hey, this one is off limits. So that's kind of like the big scenario for our shared lab example. I mean, there's lots of other things that you can do, and I'm hoping that our brilliant hive mind out here will help us, learn from each other. Other things that we've done is organizing your doc in certain ways, or pushing out web clips that are really good. Like if you have little ones who, really just need to like push one button and get where they need to go. Pushing out those web clips is a really good idea too. So I'm gonna pause right now and just ask if we can turn on the chat again and just see, or if anyone has questions. This is our time to just kind of talk about, what key learnings did you learn, or best practices, or items that you want to share, or questions. And we'll just kind of take a pause and monitor the chat and the Q&A and see what we come up with. We should have had like elevator music right now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've got some lo-fi I want to use. So you can just raise your hand if you have a question. We have one already. Where is it? Nope, went up and went down. False alarm. I have a question. How did you guys segregate those devices when you were doing that? Was it just a smart group kind of thing, different policy? Did you use sites in Jamf?
Well, in my situation with the carts, they were already segregated into sites. And then within the sites, the smart groups were dependent on the school administration. Some administrators, we let them choose. So some administrators like them into grade level groups, and some of them like them organized into teacher or subject groups. And so each school campus had we called them an Apple champion, who came in for a training. And so they knew how to facilitate the testing process, if we're talking about assessment, and how to check. The central office personnel pushed out that testing app, but so far as checking up on it, and I was about to get into that, we use the inventory feature that Tracy talked about earlier to check that dashboard, anything from battery levels to was that testing app updated. We checked on that on the Jamf Pro instance on that dashboard. We use those smart groups and smart searches to help us facilitate that process way ahead of time. And that's one thing that we were going to highlight at the end. This is not something you do the night before. This is something you plan way ahead. Like we said, it's not a slow cooker type mindset that you set it and forget it. You want to put these things into place and start monitoring. So we would start, if testing window opened in April, we would do like a trial run for our champions like the last couple of weeks in March, so that they would get accustomed to checking that dashboard and checking those smart groups and checking those inventory items.
Nice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And another thing I'd love to point out too is, and I know that this is not an advertisement for Jamf School by any means, but I know there are lots of other options that could maybe do similar. But one thing that I think is really powerful is in Jamf Teacher, you as the teacher can have control over what environment your students are getting to see. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the hybrid learning. I think that's a hybrid learning situation, but it really does empower the teacher. In this scenario, we're talking about configuration profiles that are mostly, sorry, my dog just became really needy.
It's all good.
In this scenario, that's something that IT would do, and IT is going to be really flexible and limber, and they're going to listen to their teachers, and they're going to, be able to, be willing to turn on a dime in our scenario here. But in lieu of that, we have those MDM empowered apps that allow the teacher to have control of that testing situation. So
cool. Thank you. So just in the chat, we have Mike. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Oliva. Had some questions yesterday too. But how did you lock down the Macs for testing? And how did you switch back and forth between the 3D printing mode and the test mode?
Go ahead.
I'll take the first question.
Okay.
Locking the Macs down, we had a testing vendor where all those parameters were in the app. Data Recognition Corporation produced that app. And so once we deployed that app, it did the magic behind the scenes. So that was done in app, as Tracy mentioned earlier. Some of the testing vendors, it does it for you. And some of them we have to, write scripts or set policies to, lock it into that particular web page, or restrict apps using a configuration so that they don't open. They may show there, but they won't open. So that's one way to look at it. Go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, and that just leads right into switching it. So if you had your 3D printing app scoped to the devices that are sitting in that lab, you would unscope that app, and then you would scope the configuration profile that you have set up with all the payloads and all the restrictions and everything that, creates that ideal testing situation for you. You would push that out to that set of lab computers so that it would be all ready for the testing environment.
Thank you.
Great questions. Yay. Okay. Awkward pause. Anybody have any other questions? All right, we're going to move on to our hybrid learning scenario and the things that you want to be thinking of.
So in the hybrid learning situation, the first thing that we had to overcome, because you don't have all the students in front of you, is how to keep that line of communication open. With your MDM empowered apps, you could keep that line of communication open. Of course, hybrid means, as you see in the picture, you have some of the children there or students there in front of you, and then some of them are at home electing to do distance learning. You can use Apple Classroom to monitor the screens of the students that are there in front of you, but those that are at home, you would have to use one of those. You could use MDM empowered apps such as Jamf School, Teacher, and Student for the entire class to push lessons, lesson plans, as Tracy mentioned earlier, specific apps that are addressing today's learning. And what is so prescriptive about these apps is that it focuses the learning on the task at hand. If they're only working in the Desmos calculator app for pre-calc, then you scope that app and that app only, and whatever other learning resources that may be, needed for that class, and that's all they have during that class session. It can be deployed by that class period and that class period only, or that teacher or subject area, so that you're not locking the device just for that particular time. So we see here the next point, it could be time and location based. All of that is set behind the scenes, and the student doesn't really feel it. They just look in their student app and they see that the resources are available. So again, that MDM empowered empowerment feature of Jamf Teacher, School, Student, and again, another piece of communication, the parent as well. There's a parent side of that where teachers can communicate with the parent, and the parent can continue to see what's going on with that student in that classroom, even though they're at home or coming back and forth to school. Another MDM empowerment app would be self-service. Whether that student is at home or at school, we have apps that you want the the teacher, let's say, to access as needed, then they can deploy those apps themselves from the self-service app. Let's say they only need Adobe Reader when they need it, and you've issued this device to them and didn't scope it automatically to install because every teacher in the district didn't need that app, but you had it available in self-service. There may be some documents that are needed, the employee handbook, the policy manual, new COVID guidelines. Well, save the email and just scope it out in self-service. And then it also has notification services as well. So there will be a little notification that'll pop up and says there's a new COVID guideline document there in self-service. So those are just a few examples of how the self-service, the empowerment of self-service works with the MDM. Also, app requests. How many times have you been in a situation where this has been me? I'm walking down the hall and, oh, could you please put ABC Mouse in for my first graders? They need it. Yes, sugar, but I was actually going down the hall to look at something, but I really need it. All right, could you please send me an email? Well, have no fear with Jamf Pro, and again, this is not a sales pitch, but I know this product because I used to be a Jamf Pro admin. I'm sure other MDMs have products similar, but you could put in a form where teachers could request just a simple Google form or Microsoft form, where they could request their apps, and that could go right there as a web clip on the device or a form on the self-service side. Or if you're in Jamf School, guess what? Teachers can just request that right in the Jamf Teacher app, and that goes straight to whatever personnel that you designate gets the request. Usually that's who's the admin of your Jamf School instance. So that makes the app request process even easier because it's just a matter of approving, getting the licenses and approving it, and it's there for the teachers to have as well as deploy to their classrooms. So this empowerment piece it was very valuable to us in the hybrid learning situation because we couldn't see all the kids all the time for obvious reasons.
Yeah, great. That was excellent, Christina. And so this is where we're going to pause again and ask if people have any questions or ideas, best practices, things that you've used or points that you would like to add to the conversation here. It looks like we covered it so well, Christina. There's no questions and people are just stunned into silence, obviously. All right, let's move on to our shared cart situation, which is very familiar for both of us. And when we talk about that, we're talking about having, devices that are shared between classrooms, or possibly maybe they're in the media center. I spent some time as a media specialist where I had devices that were, always kept in our library in the media center. And they needed different things on them based on what students come in. Kindergartners don't need all of the access that the high schoolers did. And there are a couple of different ways to use your MDM to make those devices as useful as possible to the students. And if you're talking about, for example, Jamf Pro, you can you can have that self-service that's also available for the MacBooks. If you have, for example, in our situation, we had Jamf Teacher and Student. So we had Apple Classroom. We used that for a portion of it. And then using the Jamf Teacher and Student, we had those classroom management features like lessons and app lock and web lock and restrictions. And then you can create that shared iPad situation that has multiple users logging into it if you want in the iPad scenario. Or you could also take advantage of Jamf Setup and Reset if you have Jamf Pro. And that is, the scenario where it's really based on the user. So if a kindergartner comes in and says, hey, I'm in kindergarten, all of the apps they need are shown on the iPad, and then you can reset it so that when that high schooler comes in and maybe they are, they're using it for biology or chemistry or whatever it is, or maybe you have just a set of iPads in your science lab, you could say, all right, I'm here for biology. These are the apps I need. I'm going to reset it when I leave. And then the apps for, the next chemistry student would show up when they log in. So there's a lot of options and flexibility when it comes to creating that. What does the user need? Giving those students choice and giving them the power to display their learning in a way that is meaningful to them and best suits, their learning needs.
And in the EDU environment, shared cart was the bread and butter with those EDU budgets, whether it was title funds, funds, or, the benefactor that came out of nowhere. You could get a lot of bang for your buck with the shared cart using the power and flexibility of an MDM. As Tracy said, you could get a lot of usage from one card. Now, we don't want to spread it too thin because, it's like playing a tug of war. This 3 teachers, mine, but within reason, you could get a lot of bang for your buck between, let's say, the science and the math teacher. You could put everything that's needed and use, like she said, set and reset to show hide per user, or just create a shared experience using your MDM. So shared card was the life's blood, I know, in my EDU environment, because we were mixed. We were Microsoft and iOS, just a few Mac OS there, but that was the first mobile device that we had, and it went from 7,000 to 10,000 really quick. But when you have 38,000 students, you do the math. You've got to figure that out before the advent of I won't say the colorful little circle people. So anyway, please think about all of the little situations that you may have on your campuses or your colleagues have, and look at your MDM and the flexibility, as we've mentioned, with configuration profiles, with app deployment, with organization, with your even with the shared card. Let's say you're sharing that between the math and the science teacher. You can do something as simple as putting them in folders, putting all the math apps in a folder, putting all the science apps in a folder. That saves teachers and students minutes. And we know instructional minutes matter, so that they're not swiping and swiping or spotlighting, trying to search, type and search. Just simple things like that can build up to a great workflow to get the best use of your shared card.
I think too, Christina, besides again, the hundreds of other things we've bonded about, but having both been on the teacher side of it, working in classrooms, and then understanding how the tech works behind the scenes, having those conversations with the teachers is so important in helping them be empowered to do what they need to do, and then they in turn can create that learning, the optimal learning situation for their students. And that's really what everybody is. That's the end game. That's the goal. And I think that for some teachers, I know even in my situation, there were teachers who didn't know that there was flexibility. They just thought they had to conform to whatever was already set up. And so I hope if there's something, good that comes out of our, the struggles that we've gone through in COVID, is that we can create that flexible learning environment and that student-centered learning situation that will make the learning environment much more impactful for all of our end users.
True. And it's not just a lock them down situation. That is not the only function of your MDM.
Right. So again, we'll pause. Yeah.
Any teachable moments from the Brain Trust out there, or any questions regarding shared card?
Yeah, we've got a question from Slack from L. Lauren. Tracy, how was your dog so calm during the presentation? Mine jumped all over me as soon as the stream started, and I was only watching.
Well, it's about a thunderstorm here, I think. I don't know. They said thunderstorms today. So that's the reason why she's needy, is because and her name is Rainy, which is very ironic, but she absolutely detests the rain. So, yeah.
So not going to do yoga with Christina.
Right.
And he says, hello, Rainy. Okay. Any other questions? We've still got 4 minutes, so you can ply them with your questions if you like to. I do have one, and it's very specific. I don't know if it's appropriate for this. So you just tell me if it's not. You were talking about activation lock, and I just started figuring out how to manage activation lock through Jamfa today. Yeah, do they have to be, if you want to use activation lock or like unlock a device, do they have to be, what's the phrase? Supervised. And what does that entail?
That would be an answer for way beyond 4 minutes. It's not complicated. I like to talk to that person. And if it's you.
Oh, it's me.
Okay. Yeah. I like to have a side conversation, but yes, to answer your question, it would need to be supervised. And I'd like to explain the difference between managed and supervised.
Sweet. Cool. We'll catch up after.
Yes.
Nice. Thanks.
But it's beautiful to be able to do that and not have to turn them into Apple, even though they work very quickly now. It's like 72-hour turnaround, but it's wonderful to just click that button and get what
just
you need.
Unlock it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Talking Moose says, best lesson I learned in EDU work. Don't lock them down. Don't disengage students from wanting to use whatever device. So you want to encourage that ownership. That's kind of Apple's model, right?
Yay.
Joyce. Yep.
I like that. Who said that?
Talking Moose in the Slack.
Oh,
love it.
Moose.
Yeah, he's got a dewlap and everything. I have no idea.
So
okay.
Give you one takeaway. Use your MDM to maximize the flexibility of your student learning and empower those educators, as Tracy said earlier. They can be your biggest advocate. No offense. This was a phrase from one of my IT colleagues. The IT gods will have to give some of their power, let it trickle down, because they can be your best friends, because they are right there in the trenches and they know what they need. So use that MDM to empower them with the tools that they need to keep that learning going. Tracy?
You summed it up beautifully. Yay.
Yay. Thanks, guys.
Great.
Or ladies, I should say. I'm sorry. That was wonderful. It was really great to have you. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much. This was great. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was.
Have a great day. Okay, so we've got a little bit of time between now and Ben Tom's, about 3 minutes. Anthony he wants to skip it for now. We'll do that.
No, let's do it now.
Okay, cool. Go for it.
It's slip, not skip. So I'm just gonna.
Yeah, we'll just switch you to Spotlight.
Yeah. So while the presentation was going from Christina and Tracy, and as you know, even though they were very excellent at being platform agnostic in their talk, they are Jamf employees. We got them recruited as speakers, plus Molly Riguel from yesterday, through the courtesy of one of our former conference speakers here, Andrina Kelly. And so while these ladies were presenting, Andrina announced that, good for us, she's returning to Canada with her husband Ian And good for them. She'll still be working for JAMF, but setting up some kind of a JAMF presence in Canada. So I know that Andrea, I approached Andrina to speak this year, and she said, yeah, I can't do it around that time frame, but here, let me reach out internally and see if there are others, in our community, particularly they have a wonderful diversity channel type group in JAMF. And she reached out to that, and that's how we got those 3 speakers. And I really want to thank Andrina. She's a great friend of Mac Deployment, and looking forward to having her back in Canada. And since Tracy and Christina are still on, if you wanted to add something, happy to have any contributions you have to sing Andrina's praises, because it's pretty easy to do that, isn't it?
Yes, it sure is. She was very helpful and very supportive in our whole process. In giving context, Christina and I are fairly new employees. Like I started in January and Christina started in February. So when we stepped up to present, Andrina just took us under her wing and really encouraged us. And she's just phenomenal. And when I heard that she was moving, I thought, oh no, because I actually live in Minneapolis, or in the Minneapolis area where she was located. But she said, don't worry, we're just going back to Canada and we're still going to be part of JAM. So really nice. It has been an excellent career opportunity for me to get the chance to work with her. And I'm sure Christina echoes that.
Yes, I'm going to keep my commentary and enthusiasm contained. Insider. They both used to work for Apple. So I'm going to keep all that in, and I'm just going to say thank you, Andrina, for sponsoring Tracy and I and Molly and giving us this opportunity. You have been awesome. And I know I couldn't have done it without you. So I want to say thank you. And thank you, Ian, for loaning us Andrina.
Okay, Anthony, is that all you wanted to get out there? Wonderful. Thanks, Tracy and Christina. It was great to have you.